Good evening, you brilliant, brilliant people. This is Aaron the Pedantic, and I would like to spend some time talking about White Box Fantastic Medieval Adventure Game. This is a game that I didn't know existed until my friend Dark Knight of Hibernia wouldn't stop talking about it, and I believe Eron the Relentless also mentioned it some. It is incredibly inexpensive. The PDF is free on DriveThruRPG. The soft cover, as you see here, was like $5 on Amazon. Um, I'm just gonna go ahead and lay out my thoughts on it, just kind of ahead of time, and then I'll kind of go through the PDF just so I can highlight in more detail what it is I like about it. But yeah, so overall, what I really am loving about this so far, because I've read it twice. I'm loving the fact that number one, it's extremely accessible. It's very inexpensive. It doesn't have a lot of things that I usually don't like, such as multi-classing. It has a very simplified, streamlined take on OD&D that has also some BX feelings as well. But the innovations of swords and wizardry as far as the single saving throw, but it also has options for other things. But it's also a very small package that is very easy to just build on, and that's ultimately the thing that I'm really liking about it. Among other things, like I said, it's an attractive package. I'll show the soft cover in a little bit more detail in front of the camera in just a minute, but that's what I'm really liking about it, just in general. So that's just like long story short, TLDR. That's what I like about it. I feel like the layout is pretty nice. Now, one of the things that just triggers me, and I can't help it, I'm sorry, I'm trying to get over it, is the guy does say storyteller and stuff like that. And it just gets me. It's a pet peeve. It's stupid. It's pointless. It doesn't really do anything. But I'm not here really whenever I read retro clones, I'm not really looking for that anyway. I'm not looking to agree with everything that they say or their verbiage on the hobby or anything like that. I'm looking at how does the game function? How is it supposed to work? And it's good. It's good. So one of the things that I really appreciate is basically it says, that you are supposed to customize the game to fit what you want, not follow the official rules forever and ever. So this is basically a rule zero of sorts. Just basically your players don't have the choice necessarily to try and hold you to something that's printed in the book, which is appreciated. There's even a section for home rules in the back. You have ascending armor class and descending armor class. You have something that I'm thinking. I'm not really set on how I feel about it completely, but you have your -1 and +1 caps on your modifiers, which they're very minimal, and part of me kind of likes that because I don't like the stat rolls to mean that much, so much that people just dwell on them, like crazy. I like, yeah, I like them to not be insignificant, but I don't want them to be just clouding what everybody thinks about whenever they first roll their character. If it helps you have an idea of what exactly you're going to make, which this kind of does in a way, because you do have prime requisite experience bonus points and things like that. Then that's kind of nice. Then I can roll up a character and I can say, well, I've got this strength bonus. Yeah, I only get a +1 on my attack roll and for melee and a +1 to damage if I pick a fighter, so it's not like a huge thing, but at the same time, because I rolled high on it, then I'm going to get more XP, and XP is going to help me level up faster. And that's a good thing, so that kind of makes you want to identify more with the fighter. If we're just talking about a -1 penalty, I might just play whatever the hell I want. Otherwise, it really, with few exceptions, there are a few exceptions. You have your 6 conventional stats, the ones that we're all used to, and you have a charisma boost for hirelings and loyalty checks. It's not too unlike what we're familiar with. One of the things that you do have is another bonus to experience based on charisma, which is interesting. And same thing with wisdom. So you can get ultimately 3 different XP bonuses, which will add up to 15%. And it's kind of a spread there. All right. Your hit points are not going to be, like they are in BX, where it's just, it's just hit die. It goes up every time until you get to a certain point, and then it's just like +1, +2, +3, etc. You do have some kind of strange spreads on here. Like you'll have, 3 hit die +1 or whatever after you get 3, and then it's like, okay, well now you get 4. Stuff like that happens. It's kind of weird, but whatever. You do have the alignments that are talked about, but it says you can make it more complex if you want, and it's pretty simplified here. Retirement, you don't really have much in the way of domain play built into this game other than some references to it just in the character, the classes. It'll say you can build a tower, or you can you start a temple, that kind of thing. But there's nothing really in the way of domain management mechanics, which I think is fine. A lot of people don't use it anyway, and that's, I think that domain stuff is cool, but I don't see it implemented too terribly often. Some people have with great results. A lot of people have said they've tried and it didn't work out too well. So I don't think it's a huge loss. And, we're at 143 pages total for this thing. This is the PDF is the second printing. Mine here, it's about the same number of pages, 143. Yeah. So fairly certain I've got the same printing and physical. Anyway, so your clerics, you have your great descriptions. And I'm gonna be honest, whenever I pick up one of these, a lot of when I say one of these, I mean a retro clone. I'm not really too concerned with all this kind of stuff. I know what a cleric is in the worlds that I'm going to be playing in. I'm sure that most people that find this are probably aware of how they want to do that, and whatever they have to say in here is really, I'm not really that concerned about it. But that's why this is an impressions video and not a review video. I'm not offended by anything that is written in here about the clerics. Maybe I'll do a video going over class descriptions and things like that if anybody asks for more detail. But you have, basically blunt weapons and oil as far as the clerics go. They get their spell casting, I think, around level 2, which is pretty, just like BX. As far as what spells they have available to them, they can choose any spell, just like you're used to. Because of the fact that they have the single saving throw, they have this +2 bonus on saving throws versus poison and paralysis. Which I really like the single saving throw mechanic, because just saying, it's going to be this at this level, unless you have this thing. That is actually a type of design that I kind of appreciate. It saves a pretty decent amount of space. It's the same principle that Morkborg uses for a lot of stuff. And I think it's a neat innovation that Swords and Wizardry did. There may have been somebody that did it before that. I'm not aware of it. So it doesn't mean it doesn't exist, though, because this is me we're talking about. There's a lot of stuff I don't know. This is what I was referring to whenever it comes to hit die. So you got 3, then you got 3 + 1, then you got 6 + 1 eventually. And you do have your to hit bonuses put in here, which makes it incredibly easy for using ascending armor class, which I appreciate. I do like ascending armor class. I'm glad that they have it in here. That's your bracketed thing. But as you can see, you do have this established temple. So when you get to the 10th level, you can become a patriarch, so they can choose to build and determine a temple to a deity, may attract a body of loyal followers who swear fealty to the character. If they, so there's really not a whole lot of meat here, but that's the point. That's the whole point of this system is, your DM is going to be the person who decides what is this going to take to build a temple, and to attract a body of loyal followers. It's not as it is in BX, where it says once you turn this level, the followers appear. This just says you could get some, and maybe that's something that is going to be a big part of your character. This is at level 10 when you're sort of capped. I say sort of because if you look later on, it basically says you can choose to have higher level characters if you want. It's pretty simple. I mean, the formula is here and it's not hard to build on. In fact, they even have a section for 6th level spells under clerics, but it just says only the gods know, which I appreciate. There's a lot of stuff about this I really appreciate. Let's see. So turn undead is also kind of simplified. You still have a chart and all that kind of stuff. You have an idea of how it works. If, basically if you're a chaotic cleric, then maybe you can recruit the undead instead of turning them. But basically all undead creatures of the targeted type are turn and flee for 3d6 rounds. So you have rounds instead of turns, which, it's conceivably not a huge amount of time compared to what it might be in some systems. And it is specific about the difference between a combat round and a turn. So that does matter. But, as long as you meet the roll, it doesn't really matter how many you're dealing with, unless you choose as a referee to implement the rule that only 2d6 hit die are turned starting with lowest to highest, which is something that you can do. What would I do? I'd try it that way. And I'd try it with the just, now let's say you got 5 rates. Well, you rolled a 7 and you're level 6. Yeah, you turned them. You turned them all 5 of them. Bye-bye. I see what happens. Who knows? How often do I use 5 rates anyway? It's when you're really trying to screw with people. So you have the turn undead variant. So you could make it a 1st level spell instead of an ability if you want. I already mentioned the chaotic thing. So the fighter, again, all this stuff is super, super streamlined, simplified. So no restrictions on the kind of weapon and armor they can use. You have your what is the term that they would call it? Some people call it a cleave. Some people call it a flourish or a I can't remember. But basically, whenever the fighter can attack one attack per level each combat round against foes of 1 hit die or fewer. I've seen some that are, if they have less than 1 hit die, this one actually gives you the full hit die. So, you can be a little bit more effective, perhaps. As far as their saving throws, again, it's just +2 versus death and poison, which is awesome. Their hit bonus gets pretty good. They get up to 10 hit die. They level at a reasonable pace. It's pretty standard with what I've seen with basic. You can get a stronghold. Again, if you choose to build a castle, you're considered to be a rank of a baron. And you can choose to attract a body of soldiers who, again, how is the implementation of this? Let the DM figure it out. I like that. That way they can just make it however they want. Some people, and somebody pointed out in the comments before, whenever I was talking about the streamlined approach of some of these games, they're saying at some point, you don't want to pay for the whole of the donut. And I think it's a great way to look at it, because sometimes you do want to have these things fleshed out. In this case, I would say, try OSE, I think Basic Fantasy has a lot of that stuff covered. Basic Fantasy, I need to read more thoroughly. Okay, magic user. They can't wear any armor. They can only wield daggers or staves. Now, when it comes to what they learn, what kind of spells they learn, it doesn't really say. This is probably not an oversight. This is probably because they want to leave that to the DM interpretation, which I appreciate. Sometimes you want to run a game in which they have to find scrolls, or they have to, do a favor for a magic user or something like that. Sometimes you want to run a game that every time that they level up, they get to choose a new spell. Sometimes you let them roll on a chart and see what new spell they learn randomly. Maybe you want to do magical research rules. That stuff's not in here. So if that's something that you're looking for, it's not going to be in here. It's just, there are some spells and, they get to memorize them and cast them. Fancy in style. All right. So again, the tower thing will attract a mix of mercenaries, strange surgeons, and even a few monsters. And they will serve the magic user. So that will sounds a little bit more like it's going to happen. It's a little different than may choose. There may be a purpose for that. But again, interpretation of the DM. They're not going to get above 6+1 hit die. And, one thing to remember, everyone has a D6 of hit die. So you don't really need anything but D6s and D20s for this game. Again, I love this. D6s are glorious. D20s are cool too. And, I know a lot of dice goblins that love their shiny math rocks. I'm not one of them. I'm just not like that. One of the notable things that you should notice is that is not there. Well, first off, you have no mention here of how you get to level 12. But it does exist, and it gives you guidance for it. And there is a 6-level spell slot. Did I call it spell slots? Well, whatever. I started with 5e, sue me. So that does exist, but as far as how do you get there? Well, I mean, I don't see why you wouldn't just double. I guess you could just add the 320,000 again and again. That way you're not going up into millions. Actually, you will anyway, so never mind. But it won't be quite as much, because if you're doubling 600, that's already up into the million, and then you're going to be up into like 3 million, basically. Not almost. All right, the thief is optional. This is probably something that makes a lot of OD&D bros happy, because there are a lot of people that played OD&D that did not appreciate the thief. So you don't want the thief? You don't have to have the thief. Shouldn't feel like you have to clarify that you have to justify that. If you don't want to have a class, then screw it. Don't have it. You don't want clerics? Don't have clerics. I know people want to argue about that. All right, thief, what do? So they can only use leather armor, but they can still use any weapon, just like BX. Backstab is pretty simple. If they're unaware, they get a +2 to their base attack bonus. And if the attack is successful, they get to roll their damage twice. So you don't double it, you roll it twice. So their +2 saving throw bonus is against traps. Now here's the thievery thing. The thievery thing is interesting. So basically anything that is thief-like that they can do, disarming traps, remaining silent, and hidden while moving, climbing walls free-handed, all of that stuff is going to be based off of the thievery skill. So it's a D6 roll, just like your surprise check, just like all that other stuff that you're using your D6 for, except, you got a 2 in 6 chance at level 1 of accomplishing a thievery thing. Now, my personal take on this is that I like the fact that the thief in BX, Moldvay BX, is really good at climbing and is only going to fail about 87% of the time. You don't have a whole bunch of guidance as in what exactly do these things mean, because you don't even have the categories split down to begin with. You don't have the you don't have the climb sheer surfaces. You don't have all that stuff. You just have it all in one category. So what I would do, and this is just me, is I'd say if you're doing climbing sheer surfaces, I don't care what level you are, it starts at a 5 and 6 chance. And maybe at some point you'd have to roll a 6 twice in order to fail. That's just me. That might be part of my Lamentations love in me. But anyway, it's very simple. They can establish a thieves guild eventually. And of course, their prime attribute is dexterity. So we have races here. The races, I mean, they're okay. I've never been a huge fan of demi-humans. If I have to pick one that I like, it's going to be either halflings or dwarves. Never been a big elf guy. The way that they do this, it's, they don't give you, all of the options about like multi-classing or anything like that. They do have a hybrid class for the thief the elf that you can use. They don't have a hybrid class for the halfling or the dwarf, but that's okay. Basically, they can choose a fighter or a thief, and they can typically advance as high as 6th level. So, I mean, I'm sure that part of the reason that it says typically is because there are plenty of people that say, screw you, that dwarf is going to get up to level 10, just like everybody else. There are a lot of people that do that. Me, I don't know about that. I don't know about that. So one of the things to really look at is that the dwarf, you notice anything missing? So they're good at fighting giants. No restrictions on weapons or armor, which, it's interesting. The phrasing kind of makes it sound like maybe this is separate from the fact that they're fighters. Because the language sounds like it would be referring to the dwarf as a standalone race class, as in, they've been trained in warfare and have no restrictions on weapon or armor that they may use. That makes me wonder, does that mean that the dwarven thief can use armor? I'd say sure, maybe. Now, a lot of times people want to go to the dwarf and the elf because they want that nice sight, right? They want that good old sight. It's not here. There is nothing here saying that they can see in the dark. They have good detection skills. They can spot traps, slanting passages, and construction while underground. So that's nice. But they still need light. I like this. Again, it's beautiful. They do get the extra languages, so there is that going for them. The elf, the thing that I often lament its existence, they can be up to 4th level fighters and 8th level magic users. And they can actually, by the looks of it, they can level up both, because you can announce at the start of the adventure which advancement chart they're going to use. It's not phrased like it is with the other ones where it says they can choose one or the other. So it looks like they can mix their levels, get up to level 12 perhaps. Screw elves. I probably would just use the races class for them, but I'm just weird. Their restrictions, same weapon and armor limitations as a magic user, unless it's magic armor. But I mean, it doesn't say anything about when they're a fighter. So I would. I could use a little clarity there, but I don't really care. Again, so much of this has basically been like, well, it's up to interpretation. And I would say, as long as you're not trying to cast spells, then sure, go for it. You can absolutely wear armor. They're good at killing certain types of enemies. They're still immune to paralysis from ghouls. They can spot things better, but they don't have that eyesight. So here is the elf advancement if you're using the class. which, it's pretty steep. They don't get like a whole ton of magic, but they get some. They get, they kind of suck, to be honest. They kind of suck. Their weapon choice is probably one of the best things about them. All right. Halfling, fighter or thief, as high as 4th level as a fighter or 6th as a thief, and 6th as a thief. So again, they can kind of mix it by the looks of it. I probably wouldn't allow that. I'd probably just say you can just level up, I don't know. I really don't like having them to begin with. I probably would continue using my occupation chart that I use. Otherwise, it makes it where if you're playing as a halfling or an elf or a dwarf, it's because you rolled one. But I don't know. No weapon or armor restrictions. Good against giants. +2 with when firing missile weapons. They are very, very sneaky if they're not in combat. And +4 versus magic on their saving throws. And they can basically talk to whoever the dominant culture is as far as language goes. It's kind of what it's suggesting there. All right, let's look at equipment. So for equipment, you have a rather simple weight system. I mean, it's familiar. If you've, been doing BX, it's familiar. A normal level of miscellaneous equipment is assumed to weigh 10 pounds. So, just bring your normal stuff. It's going to be about 10 pounds. And that's about how that works. And then, if you get some treasure, each coin in each gem is 0.1 pound. So it's pretty simple. Weapon damage is interesting. It is interesting. You got your basic equipments here, how much they cost, all that kind of stuff. Not a whole lot about like individual weight or anything like that. If you're wanting to say, well, that's not a normal weight, you can just kind of make those adjustments as needed. I really wouldn't dwell on that too much. I would just try and approximate. Oh, that's too heavy, dude. Like you're going to be significantly slower, that kind of thing. Okay. So those are just notes. You don't really need to see that. All right. So for your damage types, as you can see, everything is a D6, but it's either a +1 or a -1. -1 if it's a tiny weapon, +1 if it's a two-hander. Very, very simple. Very simple. I like it. You got some hirelings. As far as what they do, you just got to figure that out. Just use your noggin. Missile weapons, you got your basic stuff, their prices, all that. You still only have your 4 armor types. I usually like having a little bit more of a gradient. Have some in-betweens and stuff like that, but whatever. And I still think that plate mail is really cheap, but it's also really heavy. So, okay. Now, all of this stuff, there's nothing terribly noteworthy here. I mean, the movement rate is calculated quite a lot like it is in Swords and Wizardry. You have to multiply it for this. You have to divide it for that, multiply it by this for that reason or whatever, depending on what kind of movement you're talking about, all that kind of stuff. You have, just how you're moving, you being careful, are you running, are you in combat, that kind of thing. So I was thinking in terms of miles. Yeah, that's where it is. Divide by 3, multiply by 10 yards, that whole thing. I'm not a fan of that. I kind of would have preferred, if you're going to spend all the time doing these paragraphs, why not just do like a couple tables or something? That's just my personal nitpick, but I'm also lazy. So, or do both. make people know this stuff so they can do the math in their head if they don't want to have to look at the table, or just put the table there if they just want a quick ref. All right. What else? So all that stuff is really pretty much the same. All of that is pretty much the same. Just tells you to try and play things descriptively whenever it comes to finding secret doors and traps, which is something that is an art form people have to work on. It does break it down to, when you're searching, down to a 10 by 10 area and, a turn and all that kind of stuff, which is nice. It's pretty standard though. You have the very simplified way of, handling initiative. It's just a D6 on each side. High roll wins, that kind of thing. Ties actually means simultaneous. So then you have to work that out. You can have them state intent, but you don't have to. It's your choice. And then you also have the combat sequence. If you want to do that, that's an option. You want to have your prepared spells go off, then your missiles, then your melee, then your movement, that whole thing. All right. It's got the methods for handling your attack rolls. You have death is at 0 unless you want to make it negative of your level, which is an option. So if you're a level 3 character, you die at negative 3 HP. It just says you can do what you want. Screw your couch. Healing is pretty brutal. Basically 1 full hit point per day of uninterrupted rest. But if you get 4 weeks worth, you get all your health back. It has an option for binding wounds. My personal thoughts, I kind of like this. And this may be blasphemy, but I kind of like this, especially because your hit points aren't going to be massive. You're only dealing with D6s. This is pretty deadly stuff. So to me, if you're doing this kind of frees up the cleric from having to just get healing spells. I like it when clerics are spinning their, they're bringing other spells to the table. Oh, so invisible opponents -4 to hit. It's what you're probably familiar with. The thrown oil thing. I mean, I'm not a fan. I like Lamentations rules for thrown oil, which is basically, look, if you throw oil on somebody that's burning, it's not going to be like a Molotov. It's going to burn their skin and whatnot. But the chances of catching on fire, probably not terribly high. Maybe it might do it. So with this, it's just like, they're going to burn for 2 rounds. It's going to do pretty decent amount of damage if it hits. It's not terrible. It could be worse. I feel like the stuff in Old School Essentials, I know that one was pretty rough. And inexpensive. So everybody just wants to throw oil. So I believe in nerfing thrown oil. That's just my take. So let's see. All that stuff is pretty basic. You have your morale checks, and you have some jousting rules. I mean, this is just basically says up here above that they can talk their way through things, which kind of a waste of space, but some people probably need to hear it. As far as the jousting rules go, it's it's pretty cool. It's just like a standard combat rules, except for you have particular outcomes. If you roll 12 or higher, then you deal 1 point. If you inflict damage, you get 2 points. If you unhorse them, you get 3 points. And you're trying to win. And if you win, then they have to forfeit themselves. They have to take off their armor, surrender their armor and their weapon, and become your prisoner until they can be ransomed. Pretty cool. So when it comes to spells, they can be interrupted if you're using that particular sequence of alternative sequence of combat. If you're using it then. And if you have them state their intent. If you don't do all that, then they're not going to be interrupted because you don't know that they're casting a spell. So there you go. Loyalty checks. Nothing to say about that. I mean, that's nothing new. Saving throws, like I said, it's just a single saving throw. But they have the tables if you want to use the old school ones. And they also have the single saving throws on the side. All right. What else we got in here? Spells and magic. Now we're getting into the territory that I'm going to be skipping a lot because I'm not reading all this stuff. Not in this video. Maybe in another one. But there are some notable things here and there. I'm sure some people will probably point out more. But so I already mentioned only the gods know as far as level 6 cleric spells. So, of course you can make up your own stuff. Magic users, there are some notable omissions, I should say, in that you do not have a magic missile. What do you think about that? No magic missile. There are probably there are many other spells that have been omitted. Of course, you could just add them in. You could add them in straight out of BX if you wanted, because they read almost the same. So here's personal gripe. They have everything broken down by alphabetic order. And yes, that's good for whenever you are trying to reference something alphabetically, but that's usually not how I use the book. I might be weird, but I typically like to have them all listed by spell level. And I think part of that is because I like to just kind of have an idea of what people are, doing at such levels, which, I mean, you can still accomplish by reading what the spell does and then referring back, or, I mean, it's still there. It's still there. It's just a weird nitpick. I don't know why I feel like that about it. People might have good reasons to make fun of me for that. Okay, running the game section, dividing it's this stuff is really, there's not a whole lot to it. I mean, it just kind of tells you basic advice. It does tell you how to check for wandering monsters. You've got your tables for what exactly they'll encounter, reaction checks, getting lost. And what happens when you get lost? Doesn't say. At least I don't think it does. If it does, I have not been able to find it. All right, so you have how you come up with your encounters, your wandering monster ones. You got your stuff for your monsters, which is all pretty basic stuff. It's pretty simplified. You got attack, you got armor class, which you got ascending and descending. You got their hit die. They've got what kind of weapons or what kinds of attacks are they doing? What are, any kind of special abilities that they have, which it will give you the details in the description. What is their movement rate? And then it has this thing here called hit die equivalent to kind of tell you how tough are they. So like this bugbear, for instance, is a 3+1 hit dice, but it's equal to a 3 and it has this much XP. Whereas you have your, let's see, something that is off a little bit more. It's usually going to be your things that have weird effects. Those are the things that are a bit above their weight. Okay. So for instance, you have a giant giant centipede that is small is a 1d2 hit die creature, but it's a hit die 2 equivalent because of the fact that it can instantly kill you. And then the chimera here, hit die equivalent of an 11, even though it's only got 9. All that kind of stuff. So a lot of this is really simplified. I guess I lied whenever I said that you only need D6s, but I guess the DM might need D8s. But whatever. You get my drift. And if you're doing a 1d2, then I guess you might need a d4. Okay, so that's monsters in a nutshell. And you have a pretty decent collection of them. Not even gonna lie. Broken up into various types. Okay. You have some guidance for creating your own monsters. And just some general suggestions and things like that. The treasure is interesting. You know, you don't have all of the different treasure types and all that kind of stuff. It's really primarily based off of how much XP they're worth and then what you happen to roll on your D6, because that's going to determine how wealthy this thing was and how is its money divided and all that kind of stuff. It's really a pretty simple way of doing it. I think that a large part of me I don't know if I would use this, to be honest. And the reason for that is that something may be incredibly tough to kill, but it may make absolutely no sense whatsoever for it to have any meaningful treasure. But it is just here for guidance, you know. And sometimes it doesn't need to make sense, you know. It's a game. It's okay to look at, you know, to think ecology. It's okay to ignore ecology. Just, you know, whatever people want to do. So you can, you do have this guidance here that, you know, for every so much value in gold, there's this % chance that you can trade out 1,000, like, or so much gold for a medium, or for a type of gem or jewelry or a major magic item. So that is how it handles that, which ends up being really simple. Well, especially it gives you examples here to make sure that you understand. So all that stuff is there. Now, if you're looking for a whole bunch of magic items, you're going to find a few that I don't think are in some of the other stuff I've seen. I could be wrong because, you know, I'm wrong about stuff. But for the most part, pretty standard. You do have cursed things, protection scrolls, all that kind of stuff. Whenever it comes to your magic weapons, there's really not, they don't really give you a whole lot of different types of things. It's, you know, it's again, if you really want to use a lot of that kind of complex stuff, you may want to use supplemental materials or something like that. Which I probably would. You can always just make it up, though, and that's perfectly fine. You know, let them learn what their weapon does by screwing around with it. So one thing I will note is that the charges are pretty numerous. The wands, you know, they're kind of generous, I feel like, but whenever we're talking about the staves have a ton of charges in them. So you may want to think about that. I think it said that they usually have 200, so 200 to 300 charges, 200. So, but of course you can do whatever you want. They do have a fair amount of magic items. So there is that. And I think that is pretty much it. You have your section for house rules. And that is all of that. So that is just the breakdown of White Box Fantastic Medieval Adventure Game. It looks pretty nice, you know. Like I showed before, the cover art's pretty neat. It's an attractive little package. You know, you got and again, it's very inexpensive. The artwork is pretty cool. The layout is nice. I have a lot of love for having this on my shelf, and especially this being something that, you know, you could just order like 10 of these if you can spend like, about less than $60, and you could have enough of these to last your entire table, and even let some take them home. Even if they don't show back up, it's really not a big deal. It was only like $5. So you can't say that about everything. A lot of cool stuff with this. Anyway, I hope y'all enjoyed this or found something useful from it. Overall, I think it's a really cool system. I mean, is it anything new necessarily? Not really, but it's just put together well. So, I mean, if I was just in the mood for playing old school D&D and I didn't want to really have to worry about being bogged down with a lot of things, and I wanted everybody to know from the get-go that, it's what I say goes and all that kind of stuff, which, I mean, I assert that anyway. But if you want to just go ahead and set that expectation, if you wanted to have a lot of things be real streamlined and simplified and all that kind of stuff, it's a really good way to go. It's also very inexpensive, and it's a lot easier to get your hands on than this bad boy. So, I guess that's it. Y'all take it easy. It's been a long video.